The steel mill at the edge of Hartsville was a relic, a skeletal ruin clawing at the sky with its rusty fingers. It had been abandoned since before I was born, left to decay after a disaster claimed the lives of several workers, sealing its fate and the town's economy in one fell swoop. The locals whispered about the place, saying it was cursed, haunted by the echoes of its tragic past. Being an avid explorer of abandoned structures, the lure of the mill was irresistible to me. Tonight, armed with a flashlight and a camera, I ventured inside. The air inside the mill was thick with dust, the smell of rust and decay permeating every breath. The vast halls were silent, save for the occasional drip of water echoing through the emptiness. I moved cautiously, my flashlight beam dancing over long abandoned machinery, giant presses and conveyors frozen in time, coated in a layer of rust and grime. As I delved deeper into the bowels of the factory, a faint noise caught my attention. At first, it was barely audible, like the distant sound of metal on metal. I paused, straining my ears, and the sound grew louder, clearer. It was the unmistakable clanging of machinery that should have been silent for decades. The noise unnerved me, but my curiosity pushed me forward. I followed the sounds to the old foundry room, where the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. The clanging was deafening now, and over the din I could hear shouts. Angry, frightened shouts. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. These were not echoes. They were too real, too present. I flicked my flashlight around the foundry, and for a moment I saw them. Spectral figures, transparent and shimmering in the dim light, operating the machines, their movements frantic. I blinked, and they were gone, but the sounds continued, relentless. Confusion and fear wrestled within me. I considered turning back, but the part of me that thrived on uncovering secrets, on documenting the forgotten corners of the world, urged me on. With each step deeper into the factory, the air grew colder, the clamor louder. I entered the main assembly line area, where the worst of the accident had happened all those years ago. There, the full force of the spectral world collided with mine. The ghosts of the workers were all around me, replaying their final moments. A man next to a conveyor belt shouted warnings as a massive steel beam swung dangerously close. Another tried desperately to shut down a machine as it spewed sparks. Their faces were etched with panic and despair. I stood among them, a living witness to their eternal torment. The realization hit me then. They were not aware of me. I was an intruder in their world, a world stuck in a loop of their worst day, their tragedy replaying over and over. My breath formed clouds in the icy air as I watched, helpless, knowing there was nothing I could do to save them. The scene shifted suddenly. The machinery halted, the shouts died down, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Then, as if the reel of an old film had restarted, the chaos resumed. I couldn't bear it any longer. I turned to leave, my mind reeling, heart heavy with the weight of what I had witnessed. As I retraced my steps, the sounds gradually faded until once again, there was only silence. Outside, the night air felt warm and alive compared to the cold, haunted space inside the mill. I looked back once, the silhouette of the factory stark against the starry sky, and knew I would never return. I had sought a ghostly encounter, and I had found it, not in the form of eerie echoes, but as a vivid, relentless replay of the past. As I drove away, the sounds of the mill seemed to follow me in the wind, a chilling reminder that some places are best left to their ghosts, their stories too painful to relive. Yet, I knew my own story was just beginning. The images and sounds of the night etched permanently in my memory, a haunting echo of industry's forgotten souls. I've never been fond of gardening, but since moving into the small cul-de-sac, my curiosity about the neighbor's garden began to grow as wildly as the vines in his backyard. Mr. Holloway, a peculiar recluse, had the most bizarre garden I'd ever seen. Plants that twisted in grotesque forms, blooming unnaturally overnight. At first, the rapid growth seemed impressive, a curious topic for small talk among neighbors. However, it wasn't long before the whispers started. Pets started disappearing. A missing cat here, a vanished dog there. People joked nervously that maybe Mr. Holloway's plants got them. I laughed along, but unease knotted my stomach. One sleepless night, the mystery gnawed at me enough to peer through my bedroom window, overlooking Mr. Holloway's property. The sight chilled me to the bone. Under the moonlight, the plants swayed without wind, their leaves undulating as if breathing. Compelled by a mix of fear and intrigue, I decided to investigate. The next evening, armed with a flashlight, I sneaked into his garden. The air was thick with a sweet, rotting smell that made my head spin. The ground felt alive underfoot, squirming as I stepped closer to the garden's heart. That's when I heard it, a soft whimpering sound. Following the noise, I stumbled upon a horrifying scene. Embedded within the vines, half consumed, was Mrs. Wilkins's Persian cat, its eyes wide with terror. As I reached to free it, the ground beneath me shuddered, and a vine shot out, wrapping around my wrist. Panicking, I barely managed to pull free, escaping back to the safety of my home, the cat forgotten. I couldn't sleep after that. The realization that something sinister was at play haunted me. By morning, I had made up my mind to confront Mr. Holloway. Knocking on his door felt like an eternity. When he answered, his eyes were hollow, his skin pale. Inviting me in, his house smelled of earth and decay. I confronted him about the garden, but his response was a simple smile and an invitation to see how the garden thrives. Reluctantly, I followed him to his backyard, where he began to explain with unsettling calmness. "Everything has its price," he said, gesturing to the garden. "These plants feed not just on soil, but on life itself. They draw the essence of living creatures to bloom so spectacularly." Horrified, I tried to leave, but he continued. "You see, they needed more than just insects and small animals. The more they consumed, the more vibrant they grew. And I have been so lonely." Before I could react, he seized my arm, pulling me toward a particularly lush patch of earth. The ground beneath me felt alive, squirming. I struggled, but Mr. Holloway's grip was unnaturally strong. As I was dragged closer, I saw it. A new plant, small and grotesque, beginning to unfurl from the soil, glistening in the dim light. "You'll be a beautiful addition," Mr. Holloway whispered, a twisted joy in his voice. Desperation surged through me, adrenaline fueling a frantic struggle. I managed to break free, fleeing back to my house where I called the police. But when they arrived, Mr. Holloway was gone, vanished without a trace. His garden, once teeming with life, was now just a withered patch of dead plants. They say he disappeared, but every now and then, when the wind is still and the night is clear, I can hear a soft, sorrowful whispering from the direction of the now barren garden. It's a haunting reminder that some things are better left unexplored, and sometimes the price of curiosity is far too high.